Welcome to this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie. I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Good to be back.
It is good to be back. The international break, but that doesn't mean the content stops over at patreon.com/20 Minute Tims, where you can get extra videos, extra podcasts and extra writing, and we have had masses of content out during the international break. You can go over the website, you can check it out, you can see what's there before you sign up. Patreon.com/20 Minute Tims. Right now that's out the way, we can get to the real business of talking about Celtic. Martin Melly, Celtic's third draw of the season in the league against Motherwell. You and I were at it. We produced the content after it, the podcast, at the match, and we weren't too happy about it. We've had a couple of days to think about it, and I think I'm more unhappy about it. The anger is not easing.
No, it was a tough one Saturday night. I try not to let it affect me, but I was keeping me awake on Saturday night, and then yesterday I was out and about and didn't see that the Bears had dropped points until after the game was finished. So that was a wee bonus. But at the same time, it's a missed opportunity for Celtic again. A home game against Motherwell, a really out of form team, really poor. And Celtic kind of didn't look like winning the game. And it's not the first time this season. Home game against St Johnstone, game against Hibs, and this one barely look like scoring in these games a lot of the time.
It's amazing how other results in other games can change your perspective on things after the weekend is completed. But I have to say that is a distraction, and we can't let it take the focus away from the real issues, because sad as it is, we can't have it both ways. We can't be on one hand sitting there going, all this board cares about is being just better than Rangers. That's the main complaint. That's all over the place these days. All they care about is being better than Rangers, and then after a weekend where we don't lose any ground or we don't take any damage, we then say, oh, everything's fine because Rangers drop points. Those two things are in direct conflict. We can't say, oh, it's nothing, like we want to be pushing ahead, it doesn't matter how Rangers got on, and then celebrate the fact that they took. Look, they're separate. We can do that as well. We can laugh at the fact that they had a golden opportunity to put a bit of pressure on Celtic and failed to do it. But it doesn't really take away from the issues facing us, in my opinion.
Because as Melly said, we all get we forgot how fucking shite we are. Do you know what I mean? We get that Limmy moment, and it's enjoyable to see Rangers drop points. But then after it, you're left going, we could have extended our lead to the top. Had we did what we had to do, we could have extended our lead to the top. And I think part of the problem is, we are watching this Celtic team just now. What does Neil Lennon's Celtic team, Brendan Rodgers' first Celtic team, and Ange Postecoglou's Celtic team, what did they all have, boys, that I don't feel this Brendan Rodgers Celtic team has?
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us that.
No, it's a real quiz.
Could be anything from a style of play to good players.
Correct. It's both those. It's the real answer was an identity, and I feel that Celtic's play at the moment is lacking a real identity. There for me is also a question about who's our star players, who's our talisman in this team, who's the guy that we can lean on. We'll discuss that in a minute. But my main issue with the Motherwell game was, and kind of been creeping into my thoughts for the rest of this season, is we kind of lack an identity in domestic football anyway. We don't have the overlapping fullbacks. We don't have the fullbacks that tuck in. They kind of mix and match a wee bit. We kind of pass it from side to side a lot, but we're not relentless attacking. We control games, but sometimes I'm starting to wonder if that's just something Melly I say to make myself feel better about the fact that it's not particularly exciting. You know, Celtic are reliable, but they're not, they're reliable Celtic from time to time.
Because what we really want from a Celtic team is being a Ford Mondeo. That's exactly what we want, isn't it?
Well, what we're saying is Celtic are a Volvo, nice and reliable at the moment. So I think this team's lacking a bit of an identity under Brendan Rodgers at the moment. And that Motherwell game, it was another one where I felt we could have played for an extra half an hour and probably no scored.
Yeah, and
near enough was, wasn't it? It was 10 minutes. 10 minutes at the end,
That did half an hour would have covered the amount of time wasting.
It's famously 10 minutes is almost half an hour. As I just said there for some reason.
No, we are kind of lacking that identity, aren't we? We did have 80% possession in the game, so yes, we are controlling the game, but what are we doing with that possession? Sometimes I didn't want to fall into, maybe it's not a trap anymore, but that trap of just going, if Celtic aren't winning games, it's that, it's like Brendan Rodgers last season, it's that slow having the ball for the sake of it, because I don't think Celtic do play particularly slow. It's just we don't have any style of play in that final third at the moment right now. I don't know whether that's down to the lack of quality in the team. I don't know whether it's down to missing players, but you kind of can't see what it is we're trying to do. And we've got Alex, who does our scouting for us on the Patreon, and he made up a video for us about Brendan Rodgers' sort of tactics compared to what he thought when he first came in. And like he said, Celtic are sort of maximising long shots. And I was talking to him and I was saying, is that sustainable? But with Ange Postecoglou, we know the Celtic goals. How many goals did Kyogo just tap in? Like the ones against Rangers, low crosses, the ones you love, Stephen, and there's Kyogo to tap them in. We're not getting into those areas anymore. We're not getting guys in, and we're not creating like overloads. So many times last season you could see, whether it be Maeda, Taylor and Hatate out in that left-hand side, the three of them would work it and they'd get the ball and there'd be a cross, or even on the other side, whether it be Juranovic or Johnston alongside Jota and O'Reilly. These guys all worked together and made these crosses. With Celtic, it goes out to a winger and you're just kind of hoping they can beat their man, but we've got, 7 wingers or something in the squad? None of them can beat a man.
Do you think Celtic lack identity at the moment? Or do you disagree? Do you see a clear identity for what Celtic are trying to do?
Well, yeah, I don't know about identity, but I'm seeing a pattern emerging when it comes to these results. Now, a draw at home to Motherwell isn't the end of the world in a vacuum. In and of itself, it's not a terrible result. But the problem is it comes along with a string of these things that have happened this season. So we've had the draw at home to St Johnstone. So that's 2 of the worst teams in the league in terms of their form coming into those games, and we've shipped points at home to them. There was the Hibs game that was dire as well.
St Mirren could have went.
Yeah, the last minute winner against Motherwell away. Yeah. So there is a bit of a pattern emerging when it comes to these. So again, every manager is going to have draws at home. That happens, and Ange Postecoglou drew with Motherwell last season as well at home. But the problem is it just kind of follows on from a pattern of these emerging this season to the point where it's no longer a surprise. We're doing this every handful of games now. We still haven't won 3 games in a row all season, and we're almost in December. Now, again, a lot of that's broken up by difficult games in the Champions League, but that tells its own story. We should have beaten Lazio, so we could have had more wins. I think we've won 11 out of 19 games in total so far this season, so that's 8 games we've not won, and 3 of them in the league so far. In all competitions? Yeah, in all competitions. 3 of them in the league so far, 3 draws, and that's the same amount as last season in its entirety. Lost 3 games last season, which I haven't done any of this season at all. But that 2 of them were after the league was already won. There was a game at Ibrox, I think it was, and then the fiasco, the Hibs game, the absolute nightmare of a game. So it's not bad, and yeah, Rangers are making it look better by being very poor so far this season. But again, I want to focus on the problem with Celtic, because we came into this season thinking that the squad's in a great place. It's in a great place. We've left our previous manager. Got an opportunity and left as treble winners with money in the bank. How can we possibly fail from here? And we're not failing, I wouldn't use that word, but it's not what we expected. I think it's been a bit of a disappointment from what we expected going into this season. It's always going to take time to adjust their manager's new ideas and standards and style of play, possibly. But what we're seeing from the style of play is that it's not really all that enthralling, is it? So I think on the idea that it's slow, I don't know if it necessarily is slow, because I think that's just down to your individual perception. I don't think anyone's really measuring that. But I think because it's so side to side, it kind of feels like we're not going anywhere, and therefore your brain sort of processes that as it being very, very slow and controlled. And I feel like now we're using the word controlled in place of dull.
Yeah,
because
that's what I was kind of getting at.
Yeah.
I think, to be fair to Brendan Rodgers, he would probably sit here if he was in the room and say, look, I'm coming up against a team that put their whole entire team in the box. What do you want me to do? Dance through 10 players and pop one in the back of the net? So the side-to-side stuff, which I know gets people frustrated, certainly the people sitting around me at the game was getting them frustrated. There is method behind that. Brendan Rodgers knows what he's doing and it's worked. But I just wonder if Brendan Rodgers has fallen into a bit of a trap with Celtic, where turned up with an idea of how he wants to play. He's looked at the players from last season, he's looked from Celtic's perspective at what's available to him, and he's went, here's how I want to play. I need 1 or 2 key players in key areas to help me achieve that, but largely this is the system I'm going to play. Season kicks off, players arrive, the players that he brings in aren't necessarily that good. I think we can all agree no one's really set the hair. Like Palmer's been all right, but and we've seen glimpses from other people. So it's become evident that perhaps these players can't really carry out exactly what Brendan Rodgers wants to. And he's hinted at that before. He says, look, I'm a couple of we're a wee bit away from peak Celtic. He said that in recent weeks. He said, I want to add 1 or 2 bits of quality. He said that in recent weeks. So there's hints that he's already looking to the January window. He said that recently. So there's hints that this is perhaps a work in progress from Brendan Rodgers' perspective. And you can kind of see that, I think, when you watch the Motherwell game in particular. Celtic work it from side to side, and it always seems to fall down at the same players. You know, you've got Yang, who can't really do much. You've got O missing sitters. You've got Greg Taylor, who can't cross. You've got Ralston, he put in, we had an argument over a cross pre-match, pre-podcast, whether it was a good cross or a bad cross, but some of his crossing was pretty poor. So all these names that we're all kind of suspicious of, the manager's plans seem to fall down when it comes to these particular guys. But last season, and I don't want to keep comparing to last season, but it was a treble winning Celtic side that Brendan Rodgers got handed the keys to. Some of those players have moved on, but there were key players in that side you could count on. Hatate, Jota, Kyogo. All 3 of these guys, you could really rely on those guys as talismans, as key players for Celtic. If I was to put a gun to your head, Martin Melly, as much as I would hate it, I'd be crying. I don't want to do this.
All this over an argument over Anthony Ralston's crossing.
I know. Fucking tell me, Melly, I swear it worked, right? Who is Celtic's best 3 players right now?
Kyogo, McGregor and Matt O'Reilly. But
so not Palmer?
No.
Right.
But this sort of plays
McGregor?
Yeah, he's still one of the most important players. Carter Vickers as well. But the thing with that is these are guys through the sort of spine of the team.
I know people.
Do you mean the most on-form players or the best players?
I mean the best players for Celtic right now. Forget everything that's happened last season. I think if you sat 1,000 Celtic fans down and asked them, family fortune style, name Celtic's 3 top players at the moment this season, I would be amazed if Callum McGregor appeared on that list.
Right, fair enough, he's not been great. But
if he's up there, I'll give you the money myself.
What a reference, brilliant.
So what I was going to say is it feeds into what you're talking about as well, because all these guys are good players, but Callum McGregor's that guy that sits back and dictates play. Fine. Matt O'Reilly's a guy.
I hate talking over you in podcasts and I can see Steve Winston, right? But I'm going to challenge you on this. We've not had this in the podcast for a while. I can't remember Callum McGregor dictating the play in the Motherwell game, for example. He's good and he's reliable and he's there and he's always there and he's taking the ball and recycling it, and he does that with his hands quite a lot, right? Especially after a kick-off, he does that with his hands quite a lot. But when was the last time he played a killer ball? When was the last time he was good against Rangers? But when was the last time Callum McGregor was absolutely everywhere? Slide rule passes, killer balls, taking the ball, moving it quickly. Callum McGregor to me is settled into a role at Celtic. He's not rising above. Matt O'Reilly's been better recently than Callum McGregor for me. I think Callum McGregor's an all-round better player, but I think Matt O'Reilly's risen a wee bit. I want to see more. I want to see a fire lit under Callum McGregor. I've not seen that for a while.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from, and I think what I was going to go on to say is Callum McGregor does that back there. Matt O'Reilly is doing his thing. He's getting the goals. Kyogo relies on getting service, and he's not getting that now. But where's that wee je ne sais quoi? Where's that bit of quality that we have? Where's the Tom Rogic? Where's the Hatate, the Moy, the Jota, the guy that can beat someone, the guy that can play the pass? We don't have it. We've got industrial players now, but we don't have those bits of quality. Like I said, 7 wingers, you wouldn't bank on any of them to beat them and put in a cross or put in a decent shot. Palmer, while he's been decent, as soon as he went off, that's a goal-scoring threat gone. Where's the rest of them? We're not getting MD that can get the ball one-on-one, take somebody on and create something. How many times do we see it? Just when I'm talking about it there, I remember Jota beating a man, putting a ball over the back post, and there's a batter. That's not happening with Celtic now. We don't have MD doing that. And while Brendan Rodgers, his style of play is falling down now, you can see why, because when we get into the final third, into these key areas, that's where it falls down. Because Yang, for all his stepovers and that, I don't think he's ever going to be a Celtic player. He's still young, but kind of seen enough in games now that I'm going, are you going to be the guy that Celtic play week in, week out and try and get us on to the next level? No, you're not. We've seen, he gets into decent goal-scoring opportunities, but he doesn't take them a lot of the time. On the other side, we had to bring on Mikey Johnson. It is 2024 in 5 weeks. We are bringing on him during the week. Tuesday night, we've got a choice between James Forrest and Mikey Johnson.
Maybe who both.
Plays in the, they might both start. You're asking yourself, why are we in this position? What's going on here? And you're looking at Brendan Rodgers saying, like, right, where do we need to improve? And it's just quality. Like, again, we're looking at that team and we're looking at the best Celtic have got right now. he'd still replace a lot of the players. So we're lacking quality in key areas. We're getting ourselves into wide areas. You think, right, Yang and Johnson, they're not going to do it, right? We need our fullbacks going beyond them and doing something. Greg Taylor and Anthony Ralston, for all they're decent at some things, that's not their job. Celtic's squad is so lopsided in so many ways. We don't have a certain formation for the players we've got, because if you want to play a formation with the fullbacks bomb on, we don't have them. So do you want to play fullbacks that sit inside? Right, okay, you need wingers that stay high and wide and beat players. We don't have that. So we're all over the place, and I think Brendan Rodgers is trying to carve out a philosophy here from what he's got there now, and as soon as injuries come about, it starts to fall apart. But at the same time, we need to be doing better, man. We've got better players than Motherwell.
Yeah.
So I think that's it, Stephen. I think what's happened is Brendan Rodgers is midway through a season now, kind of realising that the players can't do what it requires them to do in order to be at the absolute best. I'm not saying through the baby out the bathwater because we drew with Motherwell, but I think
sack him, get him out.
I think we can broadly say there's been no new manager bounce at Celtic, and Melly mentioned the plan falling down when there's injuries. We have a very unusual squad. Brendan Rodgers himself has said it's bloated. There's players there that just don't appear anymore. James McCarthy, just Kobayashi, they just don't appear in squads at all anymore.
No.
There's players who come in and disappear and come in and disappear, and they might be injured, but you don't really get updates, so you're only left to assume that they're not injured, because every week Brendan Rodgers asks for injury update, and he doesn't mention the likes of Lager Bielka, who just is nowhere seen anymore.
He forgot Holm was injured as well recently, and then he just appeared back in the squad. Oh, by the way, that's him just back from a 6-week injury or whatever it was.
But there's that, and that you bring up a player I wanted to talk about, because the midfield of McGregor and O'Reilly and what was Hatate, those are clearly the three best central midfielders. But central midfield is an area where we're probably most bloated. Yeah. We have more bodies that can play central midfield than anywhere else.
We lost, one in the summer with Moy and brought in 3?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Hatate drops out, and you think to yourself, great, we've probably got 4 players here raring to take that Hatate spot. And nobody can make it their own. No. Turnbull can't make it his own. We're not seeing any home cooking. Iwata, it comes in and disappears and doesn't. And
Bernardo.
And Bernardo. I mean, hot take, right? See if Bernardo hasn't started 4 games by January, just send him home. Just send him home. You're never paying £5 million for this guy.
No, and I don't doubt that things would be different with Hatate in the team, because even when he's bad, he's still, he still has the potential to produce something special. That we've seen that from Hatate. But what I would say on that is that he is injured at the moment, and it's unfortunate. But he hasn't had a good season either.
He's patchy.
Yeah, very, very patchy. I think we're really talking about maybe 2-3 performances at most where we've seen the best of Hatate. Started the season on the bench in favour, David Turnbull was starting ahead of him. Now he can't get in the team. So it's a very transient squad, because you've just listed people there who have come in, have started important big games, and then have completely disappeared again. Where is Iwata? I demand to know. Where's he gone? Because I thought he was going to have a good season. I really did. He played a little bit in pre-season.
He got a fresh fade and everything.
Yes, yeah. Albeit in like centre half and right back, and he didn't look particularly great in those positions, but I thought he would at least feature. But it's the other position. You'd think, right, well, Iwata is really there to sort of supplement, help Callum McGregor out on occasion, but he's not even doing that, because Callum McGregor's starting every single game internationally and domestically. He'll end up playing another 65 games or whatever it is this season, so we can't take any pressure off him.
I've not even seen the fabled put McGregor forward one and play Iwata.
We've not seen that either. We've got Holm, who comes in, every time he starts he disappoints. I know he's only young, but we need performances out of these guys. I know that people like to say that they're projects and all that, but ultimately he's starting games for Celtic. I don't care if he's meant to be good in 2 or 3 years' time. We need points here. We need points, and we're slowly, if it wasn't for the fact that they are pish just now, Rangers, right, we'd be slowly sleeping or sleepwalking our way into a bit of more of a title challenge than was evident a few weeks ago. So we need points, is my point. We need performances, and starting guys at home doesn't suggest to me that he's one for the future. It's because he's fancied to get the job done on the day, and he's been hooked at half-time twice now. Bernardo can't get any minutes whatsoever. I saw just a little bit strange in there. So I don't know if that's contributing to the stop-start nature of Celtic's performances, because I don't want to imply that it's been all terrible this season, but I just think it's been there's been a kind of undercurrent of something's not quite right here. But there has been good performances. So Atletico at home, I thought was a brilliant performance. Blew Aberdeen away very recently, although 4 of those goals came in the last 15 minutes and into injury time. So there have been good performances in there, but it's been very inconsistent indeed.
Well, do you think there's something in... I mean, we know about this low block problem. Ange had the same problem trying to get around the low block. It was a big topic of discussion last
Welcome to Celtic,
season.
It
It is, but do you think there is just something in that it seems to take managers a wee bit longer to figure out how to beat or get points against, because we didn't beat them, these really embedded low block teams?
Yeah, of course, but I can't give Brendan Rodgers he's a rookie to this league, because he's been here before, he's been there and done it, he's got the medals to prove it. So I think with that,
he's got the giant painting of himself above the fireplace.
Yes,
oh yes,
with 2 XL bullies at either side.
And he's got the trainers on that cost him ever so much. But I'm just
turns up at a charity game with £700 Louis Vuitton trainers and he's the Brodge belt. Never change.
He would have been wearing more than that game raised for charity.
Somebody was like, Christ, your trainers must have cost a fortune. He's like, what do you mean? Anyway, sorry.
No, it's all right. It was a good laugh.
I was apologising to Brendan.
I think with this is how it's going to be in Scotland. This is Motherwell, who have been terrible, and St Johnstone, who are bottom of the league that Celtic have dropped points at home against. And while we do miss chances, you're going to miss chances in any game, aren't you? You have to take them. But as well, there's so many shots, just needless shots and all that. There's not like that Ange thing where we talk about expected goals and Celtic were taking shots from really good positions. And when Stephen's talking there, we sort of learn as we go as Celtic fans, but then we forget about things like we remember under Donny Ryla.
Donny Ryla, eh? Good old Donny, eh?
Under Donny Ryla, that we just expected Celtic at one point to turn up.
Yeah.
And we were playing Rangers in April, and we're like, nah, they'll turn up for this game. It's April. You're not turning up for anything. But under Ange, we said, look, the performances are there. We're just not getting the results, are we? You're still laughing at Donny Ryla.
So I just, for some reason, I caught myself thinking about how his first name's Donald Ryla.
I could just imagine the DR on his top there. I think under Ange, what we've seen, we always talked about, was like, look, the performances are there. It'll come together and we'll get the points. Right now, we're sort of getting the points, but the performances aren't there.
Well, that comes back to identity, doesn't it? Because Ange sort of brute forced it, to use a term. He just went, we're playing this way and we're never stopping, and eventually you'll win games. Whereas with Brendan, with Ange, you sort of saw what he was trying to do, and you go, right, we'll just push this and push this and push this, and eventually it'll work, because there was games where, absolutely all over teams, and we were having 25, 26, 27 shots on goal and all that. It's kind of not that way with Brendan Rodgers.
No, and Stephen was talking about it in the Discord. A lot of it is to do with style, and if you sit me down and say, what is Brendan Rodgers' style right now? I would honestly say, I don't know. We don't go at teams. We do go at teams because we're Celtic and we have more of the possession, but when it gets into that final third, I can't see, all right, that's what's happening, or that's what's happening, or look, Kyogo's our main threat, he's our main goal scorer. So at the start of the season he was dropping a bit deep, but he's not doing that now. Is he right on the shoulder? Is he waiting for the crosses? He's not even getting that. He's not missing the chances these days because he's not really getting them. So he's sort of wasted, but at the same time, I'm not going to blame that, because under Ange Postecoglou, sometimes Kyogo had 4 touches and he 2 goals. That's fine. So what else around him has fallen down since Ange? And it's out wide, and we've seen it so many times under Ange that the system sort of won his games, because a lot of the time when it was Maeda or Abada, I was like, there's no creativity there. And a lot of the time now, that's the best. That's probably the best we've got. Maybe Palma for Abada, but these guys aren't even fit either. So you drop down to the next guys under that, and they're no good enough. There's so many players at Celtic that are just replaceable. Joe Hart, Ralston, Scales, even though Scales is doing well, Holm, Yang. And that's all guys that started at the weekend. That's all guys that started a game that Celtic have to win. It's no on.
Another issue, Stephen, is we're crap at set pieces.
Penalties.
Particularly penalties. You get 2 in one game, which hardly ever happens for us. It happens quite frequently for other teams as it happens. I was talking to somebody today. I was like, when was the last time we got 2 penalties in one game? And he was like, We got 2 penalties against Rangers 2 years ago, and we got one 3 years ago.
Right.
And then he ran. And then he sent me a big, long, fat WhatsApp of how many times Rangers have got more than one penalty in a game, and it's very, very frequent.
Was it one of those read more at the bottom WhatsApp messages?
And then I put that in the Discord, and someone in the Discord went, your pal forgot to tell you about the time that Rangers got 4 penalties in a match against St Mirren and scored 3. So Rangers aside, we just seem to have a problem finding penalty takers. It's not just this season. We struggled last season for a bit.
Yeah, there doesn't really seem to be any identifiable number one guy for the penalties. I suppose it is David Turnbull, but the problem is he doesn't start games, so you can't take. It's not American football. You can't just bring him on to take penalties. If only. I wonder if
does that happen before in a World Cup or something? No, it was the Dutch. They brought on a keeper just to save.
Yeah, that's right. I think it worked, didn't it? Louis van Gaal. But the penalties, I wonder if we should just simplify things and make it like basketball, in that whoever's fouled has to take it. None of this picking one, just a lottery.
So you would have had Mikey Johnson.
Mikey Johnson.
Can I offer you a rethink on
that? I'll take that back. The penalties, who knows what to do. What I would probably suggest though is, I know Palma had a shocker for that one. It was a poor penalty in more ways than one. The execution and the run-up. I don't have an issue with the run-up in itself, because that's quite a common thing where they sort of stutter the run-up. And the point of that is, you see them looking at the keepers, or not looking at the ball, you see them looking at the keeper, and the point of that little stutter is to see if the keeper shifts his way onto one side and then you put it the other way. But that's high stakes, that's high risk, because the slower you get towards the ball, the more obvious it becomes where you're going to put it. And if the keeper doesn't call your bluff, or rather if the keeper calls your bluff, you're just left there basically padding it into the keeper's hands.
Here's just a mad idea, right? And I might sound a bit like a Celtic dad, but as a guy who scored a penalty at Celtic Park before, what's wrong with just running really fast and hitting it into the back of the net?
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, it's like one of those things. It's like zonal marking. It only becomes an issue if a goal is scored or conceded from it.
I mean, credit to David Turnbull. His penalty was brilliant. It was a well placed penalty, but the amount of penalties I've seen recently from Celtic where we start run ups, just smash it in the net.
I'm not a fan of it. I get the point. I get that it's a kind of bit of brinksmanship. It's a bit of sort of try to psych the keeper out a wee bit. Right, I get that, but I don't particularly like it. I really hate those ones. They've kind of gone out of fashion. Remember Jorginho and Bruno Fernandes, where they do that wee jump before it, and the problem is that you completely kill your momentum. So you're basically just taking it from a standing start, a penalty in that way. It's
dumb as well.
It looks completely ridiculous. But despite the fact that Palma did that, he also looked away before he hit it. He did a look away penalty. If you see the replay, he kind of looked off to do it, right? So ridiculous. So I had a number of problems with it. But that said, I would leave them with him for the time being until it becomes an issue where he's missed 3 out of 5 or something like that. That's
the problem. You're not getting a chance to work out. I mean, you're not getting a chance to work out your bad penalties, are you? You're just getting it. Oh, he missed. Hook him.
Yeah, there's no point in changing it every time someone misses, because you'll never get a
Larson missed plenty.
Yeah, unless you are Paolo Di Canio, who scored a lot of penalties, or Matt Letizia, and I think I've stumbled across something. Maybe
whatever happened to Matt Letizia?
Maybe that precision penalties fries your brain a little bit. Di Canio and Letizia, absolute experts at it. But unless you're one of those two people, then you're going to get the odd miss here and there. I don't think we should just tear it up, despite the fact he acted like a clown on the build-up to the penalty. And
Letizia's an expert, isn't he? He's an expert on penalties. He's an expert on long shots.
Yes.
Expert on passing.
Yep.
Expert on chemtrails, 5G, COVID vaccines, the great replacement. He's an expert on all these things.
Yeah.
He's a brainiac.
Do you know he actually, supposedly, he offered his penalty coaching services to England before national or an international tournament recently. Yeah, so in the last few years he offered him. He
didn't phone me back or something. Dejectedly.
So it was it after the one they lost to Italy? So 3 of them missed. It was Sancho and Rashford. They missed their penalties, right? And he said after the tournament that he'd offered his services to England, but the woke Mr. Southgate turned them down.
Yeah.
So he said.
Yeah, wonder what that voicemail was like. Honestly, they should just release that voicemail.
Did he turn you down, or did he ignore you altogether, Matthew?
3 a.m.
But all this to say, leave Palma on it for now.
Okay,
but make sure he tightens up his act a bit and stop just as you say, run up really, really fast and hit it really, really hard in the direction of the goal, and there's a fair chance you'll score it.
You got any penalty tips for Celtic?
Score them, please. And I mean, the Hatate one we've had, they just seem to squirm under the keeper over in this year, actually. We haven't had a great penalty taker. Juranovic was decent, he still missed. Giacomakis, he even missed as well. But Palma's a good player, he scores goals and that, but he still does wee things to annoy me. Like, he's not playing during the week because he got booked for celebrating a goal that didn't even count. He's suspended for 2 bookings, one of which is celebrating a goal that didn't count, the other's for dissent.
He talked himself into a booking
so
for no reason.
Without the guy for that. He's missed a penalty here. And look, he's been a big threat, but it's just wee things like that. Like, stop trying to be the show pony. Just do the job and then do the big stuff after that. No, in fact, don't, because that's how you get booked for celebrating. just do your job.
Cut the shit, mate. It's went tits up.
I just feel he's a bit Instagrammy. He's doing all these things for Instagram
man, you
reels.
sound old. This is what part of fun of being a footballer's about. You score one goal and you go and you do 3 celebrations.
Do you know what's more fun? Scoring goals and playing in the Champions League, and he's not doing either of them this week. So
doing his dances on the TikToks.
He does do. He did the corner flag dance, didn't he?
He's done every celebration going, isn't he?
We do have a winger problem. Marco TILIO came on. Brendan Rodgers said he played some minutes midweek. And he wanted to keep, he could see that confidence in Marco, and he wanted to keep that going by bringing him on with 10 minutes to go against Motherwell, desperately seeking a goal. When I saw him, I've got to admit, now we have Alex, the scout on Patreon, Euroscout, who does masses of stuff. He does stuff with Athletic as well. You should check him out. But he's on our Patreon. He scouts all the incoming players, and he was very impressed with Marco TILIO. TILIO comes to Scotland.
I would use the word raved.
Yes, he did rave about him. TILIO comes to Scotland, and there is there's rumours that he's struggling to cope with the demands at Celtic. Not that he's lacking talent, but just that, what his manager and coaches demanded from him in the A-League compared to what Brendan Rodgers needs in a Celtic team, there was a bit of a gap there that TILIO had to fill. And when he came on, I thought he looked decent on the ball, looked fast enough, very, very little opportunity to actually impress.
I thought he was just going to stop after a little there.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. But he is pretty small, and it some sort of reminded me of the comment, Stephen, that Brendan Rodgers made about power. And you have a look across the Celtic squad, and Brendan Rodgers he's not been raving and positive about the Celtic squad, and there have been, you can dig into little things of what he says about what he feels, and I just couldn't help but cast my eyes across the Celtic team, across the likes of TILIO, McGregor and a few other players that we've got, and then look at Brendan Rodgers' teams and Premier League teams, and you think, I wonder if there's something in, we maybe need to look at getting a bigger, physical, stronger presence in the side. Not just picking on TILIO here, but I don't see any Premier League team really signing a player the size of TILIO. The physicality of him, really small guy.
Well, if they were to, they'd be undeniably world class rather than a guy you're hoping to develop over the next period of time.
I want to just recognise it's easy for me sitting here at 6'2".
Yes,
to talk about this,
6'2" and 14 stones of solid gristle.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, Brendan Rodgers is not a stupid man by any stretch of the imagination, so he will be aware that football sometimes works in trends and cycles. Sometimes things come in and out of fashion, and he will be acutely aware that Man City have won the Champions League last season and indeed the treble with a team of absolute monsters.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying it's easy for a team like Celtic to go out and spend £1 billion on the best players that happen to be giants and very, very good at football as well. That's very difficult. The trouble is Man City have bought all the guys who are 6'3" and world class with the ball at their feet. They've got all those guys. But at the same time, there's not really any excuse for a team like Celtic not to be able to go out and get athletic specimens of players. They're not going to get guys of the level of Haaland and Akanji and John Stones and all that in terms of their footballing ability. But what Brendan Rodgers has come to the club saying is that he would like players with power. And I can only speculate, but I'm putting 2 and 2 together and probably just sort of speculating that he has seen that is where football is going for the time being. And what he has got just now is the absolute opposite of that. Again, I want to be clear, I'm not saying Celtic can go out and replicate what Man City are doing at the moment, but they can be a sort of scaled down version of it in Scotland, because what we face almost always in Scotland is teams that are bigger and strong. I mean, Motherwell are all huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it came across.
Some Irish guy played for them. I can't remember what his name was. Skin-headed boy. He was massive.
And look at that corner. That corner. It just
sense it.
It was a fiasco, and Greg Taylor was not great for it. But what I would say about that is people have rightly pointed out that Greg Taylor is one of the smallest guys on the pitch, marking one of the biggest guys on the pitch. But I don't think Greg Taylor's height was relevant here, and this is why. See, when the corner arrives at him, he's already on the deck. So it doesn't matter what height you are if you're already lying down by the time the corner arrives. So this thing about power has come up time and again, and it's the only thing that he has said, because quality can mean a lot of things, right? That's quite a broad term when you're talking about football, but power's very specific. And that's the thing that when you look at the team, we just don't have. Always a big guy. We've got some big defenders, but none of them are playing because we brought in Lagerbielke and Nawrocki in the summer. I don't know what's happened to either one of them. Maybe Nawrocki's had a setback. We've no news on it, so we can only assume
that's
that he's
the
not in
message
the
Celtic,
squad.
isn't it? Just to interject here, you give us better updates on who's injured and who's not. We really need it.
Especially for us.
Or maybe, well, again, we're sitting here assuming maybe every injury update is bang on accurate.
Yeah.
And if they're not included, then they're no play.
We can only go on that then. If there is a lack of information, all we can just say is that he's not in the squad because Phillips is fancied ahead of Nawrocki, which is a situation for another time, but it is a situation in itself that we need to address.
The only argument you can maybe put forward for that is Nawrocki's not in the Champions League squad. They've still got 2 Champions League games. Phillips and Scales and Carter Vickers are in it, so maybe.
So where's Forrest then? Because he's in the Champions League squad.
Yeah.
He's not in the squad, and Nawata's not in the squad. So very, very strange squad setup. But again, just to wrap up on that, power is something that Brendan Rodgers wants in the team. Does he have it just now? No, and that's where the board need to get him his own players thing. That's where it should all be focused, because we can all say that we want better players. That's what every manager's after, but he asked for something very specific and he didn't get it at all. And we're watching guys like Tilio come off the bench to try and rescue a win at home. In the 94th minute he comes on. I'm not making any judgments on Tilio as a player, right? I think he's supposed to be very, very talented. There'll be Australian people watching this and thinking, no, that guy's going to shock you. Lord knows we've been wrong about that before, because we've had our Aussie cousins tell us you're going to eat your words about Ange, so we might get that about Tilio. So I'm not judging him just now. What I'm merely pointing out about Tilio is that he does not fit the bill of what Brendan Rodgers said he wants in this team, and he's another one in a succession of these players who do not fit the bill that Brendan Rodgers set out. Yeah,
and if you're looking at Tilio, he's sent on, but only because Yang pulled up.
Yeah.
Only because Yang pulled up with, I don't know if it was injury or cramp or whatever, and go on and win that game, son. He's going on as 7th choice winger or something. That Maeda's out, Palma had to go off, Forrest's out, Abada's out. You're looking at it, where is he in the pecking order? He's at the very bottom, he's coming on. I thought he looked alright when he came on, from what you can tell from him, but it's nearly December, he's coming on. It's not really fair on the guy either, is it? For he's just been flung on there in the hope that he can go on and win a game for Celtic single-handedly, and it never looked like Celtic were going to score.
It's him and Johnson just get thrown into these situations. That's twice it's happened to Mikey Johnson this season. Again, we can all have our chats about Mikey Johnson that we've had so many times. There's no really any point in going into it. He was involved in the penalty, but the fact is he's been used twice, to my knowledge, this season, and both are when we're chasing a draw when nothing has really worked for, or chasing the full points in a draw when nothing's really working for Celtic. It's no great. It's not great for that boy to be in.
As we say, it all comes back. It's just an odd squad. It's an odd team, and it's the way they seem to be utilised is quite odd. And maybe that's the secret. Maybe what we started this podcast talking about. We can't really identify a particular style with Brendan Rodgers. Maybe it's because the players change all the time. Players come, players go. He doesn't know who's best 11 is. And when you've got a squad that's as transient as that, it's very difficult to implement a very particular style. We've got 2 others of business before we wrap up. Lazio,
right? Just
get beaten by the bottom of the Serie A team. I'm not going to try and pronounce her name because
Salernitana.
That I would have nailed that. And I believe they've not won in the last 3 games. Lazio. Yeah, I've got it written here. Yes, winless in 3 is our Lazio. Do you, Melly? You're smiling already because you know what I'm going to ask you. Do you think there's any chance for some revenge here?
No.
Okay.
I'm trying my best. A friend of mine done a bit of scouting on Lazio as well on his Twitter feed, and he's said that their 2 centre halves are possibly out. One of the other better players is out, and while I'm going, yes, John, that's all great, we have a choice, or maybe both, of Mikey Johnston and James Forrest playing out
if Young's
wide.
injured, it's going to be both.
Yeah, I can't see Celtic potential to maybe go 3-5-2, but when your wing backs are Alistair Johnston and Greg Taylor, is that going to do you much good? So I'm not really sure what.
Bernabe.
Oh,
no, he's not in the
he's
squad.
not in the squad. He's not in the squad, Stephen. So you're looking. I'm trying to figure out what Celtic can do, because he said if you've got pace that can get in behind, then you might do well. I was like, we don't have that. We don't have that. If we play Yang, maybe he's got a bit of pace. He doesn't have the delivery, so
and he just drifts inside every single time.
So and that annoyed me about Yang, because when you're looking at things, you're trying to see, right, what can he do? What can he do? It's head down and go inside. Like a couple of times, Ralston went on the outside. He didn't even have a clue he was there, and it was the same for home as well. I just didn't think they'd any spatial awareness about them.
This is actually quite a good segment. What was what's the one thing that annoyed you most from the Motherwell game? Right, so that was you. Was that yours?
One of many, but yeah.
What was the one thing that annoyed you most from the Motherwell game?
Time wasting.
Yeah. I think mine was Anthony Ralston clipping a ball into the back post when there was no one there.
Oh, that was
so what Anthony Ralston did there, I think, was just did a thing he's seen happen on football plenty of times without actually being cognizant of which football match he was in. So anyway, you don't hold out much hope for Lazio.
No, I think we've struggled in the Champions League in certain games with our best players and without so many threatening players. If Champions League games, Maeda would always start for me. He's not there. Where's the goal threat? Apart from Kyogo, it's Palma. Okay, Kyogo's a goal threat. Who's going to create for him? All right, if this Celtic team don't have an identity right now, do they do the basics well? No, they concede a lot of goals from crosses, far too many goals from crosses. They don't attack set pieces well, and we don't defend set pieces well. So I think we're going to struggle.
Get the feeling you're not confident. So Stephen, just let me look. Listen, Stephen. Right?
Yeah, is this a rallying?
Listen, we owe Lazio. We owe them. We had them, and they slipped through our grasp at Celtic Park. Right? They're struggling. They could have key players out. We are going. Our European performances, ironically, been some of the best this season.
Yeah.
We'll turn up. We know if we beat them, then it's Feyenoord back at Celtic Park, provided Feyenoord get gubbed, which you would expect. It's Feyenoord back at Celtic Park.
7 points are we talking here?
For one last go. We're not completely out of this yet. And we've beaten Lazio before.
Yeah.
They slipped through our fingers at Celtic Park.
Don't have the Lenny factor though. We keep saying this.
He did a podcast. He did a podcast with the official
Summon the spirit.
Yeah, the official Celtic
Survival
podcast.
now. Don't be plugging that.
I know. They definitely watch. I know you do. But it was actually decent. So look, you don't see a repeat.
Well, that's the positive way to look at it. I think that's a valid way to look at it. And what I would say is that while overall it's undoubtedly a tougher challenge than Motherwell, right, on paper, in any conceivable way, it's a tougher challenge than Motherwell at home. But it's a different challenge, and in some ways, not always, it might work out for the better for Celtic. You've already said, Jamie, that the Champions League performances have been good. We've been quite unlucky in certain ways, disappointing in other ways. But it hasn't been apart from Atletico, which was a complete and utter disaster, there have been good performances in there. And it's not like Motherwell, who are just going to sit there and waste time and make it very difficult and have Celtic just perform in that sort of semicircle around the pitch and then Yang drifting it. That's not going to happen against Lazio. They're not going to play like that at home. They're not going to play like that in front of their own fans. They're going to be coming out and having a go at Celtic. They will smell blood and think, well, Celtic are bottom of the table. We'll easy points for us. They'll come out a bit and try and play a bit. That'll allow Celtic the opportunity to play a little bit better.
Yeah.
The opportunity to do so. Whether they do it or not, I don't know.
It's going to be a proper football match.
Yeah. So Celtic have at least the platform to potentially thrive in that environment. But it hasn't. It's been a bit of a disappointment, Europe overall, because we could be sitting here much, much better off. Feyenoord was a nightmare, but we should have beaten Lazio. That's good. I think when we're looking back on this season, that's going to be the big one. The home game against Lazio is going to be the big disappointment. We could have been sitting in so much better position going into this, in terms of like head to heads and all that. But it's going to be tough, but they're not very good. I wasn't impressed with them at Celtic Park one bit, and that's led to the overall disappointment of the group. I wasn't impressed with Feyenoord, but we get 2 men sent off. Wasn't impressed with Lazio, and we somehow managed to lose that game. So traditionally away in Europe, Celtic aren't great. Certainly not in the Champions League. It's been a long time since we've won. So for all those reasons, it's going to be very, very difficult. But also some of what we've said here might work in Celtic's favour. It might be a really good game for those reasons. But Celtic are missing key players as well. So there's Maeda, who's very, very important at this level. There's Hatate, who, despite the fact he's had a spotty, patchy season, is capable of playing at this level. Not available. We're going to have not only second, third, fourth choice wingers, we're going to have guys from 2018 on the wings for Celtic. Midfield, who knows? I don't see home playing.
Pre-COVID Mikey Johnson?
Who would you play in midfield?
I was going to... Pre-COVID Mikey Johnson is the only version of Mikey Johnson that exists. Mikey Johnson is a pre-COVID footballer.
That's the last time he scored for Celtic.
Yeah. 2019 was the last time he scored for Celtic. Who would I play in midfield? Bernardo?
Probably.
But I'm just pulling a name out
but
there.
That's it. But why? Why would you play
No
Bernardo?
reason. It's just a name that popped into my head.
Look, I think I know it can go our way. We're not out, but it's going to be difficult. I think the one thing that's going to let us down is a lack of pace. There's no pace on that side. Neil Lennon touched on it in the official Celtic podcast there. He says one of the key things to him doing so well in Europe, and they rhymed off his European record, and I was astounded how good Neil Lennon's European record was, and I can't remember it, but the one thing he did say was you need pace, especially pace at the back, because that will protect you from any counter-attacks where you're trying to go up there and score, and you're looking through that Celtic team.
It'll protect you from being Celtic-y in Europe, is that what we're saying?
And we don't have any pace really throughout that side, really. Don't mean generally, I mean the side that's going to take to the pitch tomorrow, whatever form that takes, there's not an awful lot of pace, especially in the defence. We don't have pacey full-backs. AJ's okay, but will he play?
Ralston's, I would say Ralston's bordering on fairly slow, to be honest.
He's another one that has. I don't know how they teach Celtic youth players to run, but that boy runs funny. Him and Forrest, they both run funny.
McGregor a wee bit as well.
All weird, right? But the point I'm making is, if we're going to get let down, I think it'll be by the lack of pace. But we might as well go for it because we're not out. And you tee up a game, if Feyenoord lose, and you tee up a game taking Feyenoord at home, then that's an exciting end, and you could escape this with some. You could qualify, but you could escape it with a bit of dignity. You know what I mean? There's a bit of dignity to be played.
Oh, he wants dignity.
Oh, Jesus! I can't believe I said
Play
that.
Play that out. Let's call the episode that. We want dignity at this club.
Imagine it. Let's finish with Buckie Thistle. That's good for them, isn't it? The dream tie for Celtic.
Let's be patronising, lads.
Well, we don't necessarily need to be patronising, but it's good to break out of the norm a little bit and get one of these little clubs that don't have much money. They come to Celtic Park. There's definitely be Celtic fans rather, playing for Buckie Thistle. Get to play at Parkhead in the Scottish Cup, and I saw the chairman on a soccer YouTube thing today. I can't remember the name of it.
Soccer YouTube?
It was PLZ Soccer, that's why it's called that. There we go. I saw him on that giving a quote saying, the money that we'll get for this tie will keep the club going for years, and that's what it's all about.
Their keeper will get to save a penalty.
Nice day out. Gets to do stuff. Journalists will get to talk about Inverness Cally Thistle that happened 20 odd years ago, and
get told what their jobs are.
They'll get told what their jobs are and all that. Everyone will get to do their stuff, and we'll get to podcast because we will be there, and we will have plenty of Patreon content. So check that out, patreon.com/20minute Tims. But most of all, thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week.